Picture a dining room in a quiet, secluded house surrounded by the deep, ancient forests of Finland.
Oh, setting the scene. I like it.
Right. Well, it's the 1940s, and a world-famous composer, a man who would eventually live to the age of 91, is standing in front of an open fire. And beside him is this laundry basket, just completely overflowing with handwritten sheet music.
Which is wild to even visualize.
It is. His highly anticipated Eighth Symphony.
Yeah.
I mean, a work the entire classical music world has been holding its breath for years, is in that basket.
Yeah.
And one by one, he is just feeding the pages to the flames. His wife, who was watching this happen, later says she couldn't even bear to stay in the room.
I mean, I wouldn't be able to either.
Right. And this event marks the climax of what historians call the silence of Gervanpä, which is this 30-year period at the end of his life where this titan of music simply snapped.
He just went totally quiet.
Exactly. So what drives a genius to burn his own legacy? That's the mystery we're unraveling today as we welcome you to this deep dive into the sources on Jean Sibelius, Finland's greatest composer.
And honestly, one of the most fascinating psychological studies of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
It is a remarkable mystery. And the sources we are working from today, they offer this really comprehensive biographical look at his entire life. But our goal here is to look far beyond just, the notes on the page.
Right. We want to understand the actual human being.
Exactly. The human being making those sounds. This is a man whose music was described by contemporary critics as simultaneously pure spring water and a literal volcanic eruption.
Which are two very different things.
Totally different. And understanding the mechanics of how one person's mind produces both of those extremes requires looking really closely at his early failures, his intense personal demons, and, well, the heavy burden of becoming the living symbol of a nation.
Yeah, and the tragedy of that burden actually starts from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't even born Jean Sibelius.
No, he wasn't.
He was born Johann Christian Julius in 1865 into a Swedish-speaking family. But his father, who was a doctor, dies of typhoid when Johann is just a toddler.
So tragic.
It is. And this leaves the family with massive debts, forcing his pregnant mother to sell their property. So he ends up being raised in this heavily female-dominated household with his mother and grandmother.
Right.
And the primary male figure in his life becomes his uncle, Care Ferdinand Sibelius, who is a merchant but happens to really love music.
Which changes everything.
It does. Uncle Per gives young Johann a violin when he's 10 years old, and that instrument basically becomes his entire world.
It gave him an identity. Even the name Jean is tied to his desperate desire to craft this artistic persona.
Wait, really? The name John?
Yeah. During his student years, Johann found a stack of old French business cards. They belonged to another deceased uncle, a seafaring man, and he just decided to adopt the worldly name for himself.
That is so funny. He literally just lifted it from a business card.
He did.
Yeah.
He was utterly obsessed with the idea of being a touring virtuoso. He famously said later in life, "I hated pen and ink. Unfortunately, I preferred an elegant violin bow."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he really wanted to be on stage.
But there is a massive catch to that dream.
Right?
Because he started serious training at age 15.
Which is so late.
In the fiercely competitive classical world, 15 is practically retirement age for a prodigy.
Pretty much.
But he practiced from morning to night, performing Mendelssohn concertos, just completely dedicating himself to this path. But eventually he hits a wall.
Yeah, reality sets in.
Exactly. He has to face the devastating reality that he simply is not good enough to be a world-class soloist. It's a profoundly painful awakening for him.
It is.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand this turning point, we have to look at how a failed violinist pivots a composition, and how that personal failure aligns perfectly with a national crisis.
That's the real crux of it.
Right, because he starts writing heavily Finnish music inspired by the Kalevala, which is the Finnish national epic poem. And he does this right as the Russian Empire is stepping up its oppression of Finland.
Timing is everything.
It really is.
Yeah.
He writes a choral symphony called figureThe, which a critic called that volcanic eruption we mentioned earlier.
Right.
And then comes Finlandia. Now, I've always thought of Finlandia as like a 19th century viral protest anthem.
Oh, I love that description.
Thanks. But I struggle with the actual mechanics of it. How does a piece of orchestral music with no words, no lyrics for anyone to sing, actually function as a political tool for a nation seeking independence?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the geopolitical landscape, Finland was a grand duchy under the Russian Empire at the time.
Okay.
And the Russians were executing a policy called Russification. They were actively trying to strip away the Finnish language, their culture, and their self-governance.
Just totally erasing their identity.
Exactly. So by taking the Kalevala, these ancient mythic stories, and turning them into massive roaring orchestral works, Sibelius gave the public a sonic identity, one that didn't rely on spoken language.
Oh, which makes it incredibly hard to censor.
Precisely. You can't ban a feeling. Finlandia was originally part of a clandestine series of historical tableaux written to support a newspaper that the Russians had shut down.
Wow.
Yeah. To sneak performances past the Russian authorities, they had to constantly change the title on the program.
You're kidding.
No, seriously. Sometimes they'd call it something super innocuous, like Happy Feelings at the Awakening of Finnish Spring.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
It's so subversive.
It was. The mechanism of the protest was the physical sound itself. The swelling, aggressive brass basically mimicked the cadence of a marching resistance.
Oh, I see.
It gave people a shared, literal heartbeat to rally behind. He became a national hero almost overnight because he supplied the emotional fuel for a country refusing to be silenced.
That is incredible. But becoming a national hero practically overnight seems to have poured rocket fuel onto a personal life that was already pretty chaotic.
Oh, absolutely.
He marries Ino Jernfeldt in 1892, and the sources make it very clear that being married to Jean Sibelius was a grueling experience.
To say the least.
Yeah. When they lived in Helsinki, his lifestyle was incredibly lavish.
Yeah.
I mean, he was spending exorbitant amounts of money in restaurants, racking up massive bills for champagne and lobster,
Just burning through cash.
staying away from home for days on end to party with other artists. The financial ruin and the sheer stress of his absence actually drives Ino to a sanatorium from exhaustion.
It was a very dark time for their marriage, and to try and escape the overwhelming temptations of Helsinki, they decided to build a house out in the country, near a lake.
Right. Inola?
Yes, Inola. But geography doesn't cure addiction.
No, it rarely does.
He still traveled, and he still drank heavily. That is, until a massive medical wake-up call in 1908. He develops a throat tumor, which they strongly suspect to be cancer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he has to go to Berlin for multiple surgeries to remove it. He genuinely believes he might die.
That's terrifying.
And the sheer terror of that brush with mortality forces him to vow to quit smoking and drinking entirely.
Just cold turkey.
Yep. And the music that pours out of him right after this, specifically his Fourth Symphony, is stark, grim, and intensely introspective. It is literally the sound of a man looking death directly in the face.
I've always struggled with this part of his myth, though.
How so?
Oh, we constantly romanticize this drunken, tortured artist trope, But looking at the sheer volume and complexity of his output, how does a guy who is drinking that heavily maintain the rigorous mathematical focus needed to orchestrate a symphony?
It seems impossible, right?
Yeah. I mean, is there something we're missing about his relationship with alcohol?
That is a crucial question, and the sources point to a medical detail that completely shifts how we view his excessive drinking.
Okay, what is it?
Researchers and medical experts have found substantial evidence that Sibelius likely suffered from an essential tremor, possibly starting from a really young age.
Oh, a tremor. So his hands would shake.
Violently. His hands would shake so badly that he physically could not hold a pen to write music.
Wow.
And in that era, one of the most common, highly effective, though obviously medically discouraged ways to temporarily suppress an essential tremor was alcohol.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it depresses the nervous system just enough to steady the hands.
That reframes his entire life.
It doesn't it?
Yeah. He's not just some diva ordering lobsters and champagne for the fun of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a guy trapped in this agonizing cycle of dangerous self-medication just to allow his hands to function long enough to get the music out of his head and onto the paper.
It is a desperate practical workaround.
That is so sad.
It is. The tremor made his social life humiliating, but more importantly, it threatened his very ability to compose. So you have this intense paradox. His physical body is failing him. He is deep in debt. The world is inching toward global war. And yet he maintains this transcendent, almost spiritual connection to the natural world around him.
And that paradox peaks beautifully with his Fifth Symphony. He's at Enola in 1915, struggling to write, dealing with all of this physical decline. And he looks up and sees 16 swans flying overhead. He actually wrote in his diary that it was one of the great experiences of my life.
That imagery is just stunning.
It really is.
Uh,
And he takes the imagery of those flying swans and translates it into this massive, sweeping horn motif in the finale of the Fifth Symphony.
oh, it's iconic.
The tension between his failing body and the soaring nature around him seems to dictate his entire musical philosophy, which was wildly different from what the rest of Europe was doing at the time.
Oh, completely different. By the early 20th century, Sibelius was engaging in a very public, if unspoken, rivalry with other European composers about what a symphony should actually be. And the defining moment of this is his famous 1907 walking debate with Gustav Mahler.
Another absolute titan of the orchestral world.
Exactly. So they're walking together, and Sibelius tells Mahler that what he admires in the symphony is its severity of style and the profound logic that created an interconnection between all the motifs.
Which sounds very disciplined.
Very. But Mahler flatly disagrees. Mahler replies, "No, a symphony must be like the world. It must embrace everything."
Here's where it gets really interesting when you look at the mechanics of how they both composed.
Yeah.
Because if Mahler's music is like a crowded, chaotic Russian novel with 100 characters running in and out of the plot, with cowbells and offstage brass bands and massive choirs,
It's a lot.
it's so much. But Sibelius goes in the exact opposite direction. He once said he wanted to offer the public pure spring water, whereas other composers were serving up heavy cocktails.
I love that quote.
It's perfect, because instead of building a house by bringing in bricks and wood and assembling them, which is how most symphonies were written using traditional sonata form, where you introduce a theme, introduce a contrasting theme, and mash them together for conflict.
Right, the traditional way.
Sibelius wrote music more like a fractal.
A fractal. Okay, explain that.
He starts with a tiny 3- or 4-note shape, and every time you zoom out, that exact same shape has organically expanded, mutated, and branched out until 20 minutes later, it has formed the entire massive structure of the piece.
What's fascinating here is that by stripping away those traditional 19th century markers of form, Sibelius was doing something incredibly radical.
Even though it didn't sound super avant-garde.
Exactly. The surface of the music still sounded tonal and accessible. The philosopher Milan Kundera actually called him an anti-modern modernist.
Oh, that's a great label.
Right. He disguised these radical structural innovations inside music that sounded like ancient forests. And this caused fierce arguments among critics and audiences.
I can imagine.
In 1935, a poll of U.S. radio listeners voted him the most popular living composer.
Wow.
The British composer Ralph Vaughan Williams adored him, telling him, "You have lit a candle in the world of music that will never go out."
That's high praise.
But the critical elite, they largely despised him.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The influential theorist Theodor Adorno wrote a notorious essay stating that if Sibelius is considered good music, then all the standards of musical quality from Bach to Schoenberg are completely invalid.
That is brutal.
It gets worse. Another critic, René Leibovitz, literally published a pamphlet titled Sibelius, the worst composer in the world.
Calling him the worst composer in the world is just staggering in hindsight.
It really is.
Because that organic, slowly shifting, repetitive style of his laid the direct groundwork for modern minimalism.
Absolutely.
Today, massive contemporary composers like John Adams, Philip Glass, and Arvo Pärt all point to Sibelius as a primary influence.
He was way ahead of his time.
He was. But being the voice of the deep Finnish forests and the unyielding symbol of the Finnish nation, well, it came with a terrifying price tag when the 20th century violently reshaped the map of Europe.
It did, and looking at the sources from this era is a stark reminder of how chaotic history is.
Right. And we should pause here and remind you, the listener, that our goal here isn't to judge his politics from a modern armchair.
No, not at all.
We are impartially reporting the historical facts from the sources. We aren't condemning or endorsing these political alignments, but just exploring how the chaos of war impacted him directly.
Exactly. Because in 1918, the Finnish Civil War breaks out between the whites, who were conservatives, and the reds, who were socialists.
Okay.
Sibelius supported the whites, and the fallout was terrifying. His beloved home, Ainola, was searched by armed red guards looking for weapons.
That must have been so violating.
It was. His brother Christian, who was a psychiatrist, was arrested for refusing to reserve hospital beds for red soldiers. Friends of his in Helsinki were murdered. He eventually had to be smuggled out of his home by an armed escort just to find safety in the capital.
And that political pressure cooker only intensifies heading into the Second World War.
Oh, definitely.
Because Finland had already been invaded by the Soviet Union in the brutal Winter War of 1939. So by 1941, deeply anxious about Bolshevism and a total Soviet takeover, Sibelius actually advocated for Finnish soldiers to march alongside German forces when Germany invaded the Soviet Union.
Right.
And the sources also note that he signed an Aryan certificate.
Which is a heavy detail.
It is. In the 1940s, under German hegemony, this wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a required bureaucratic instrument used by the Nazi regime to prove someone had no Jewish ancestry.
Right. And signing it allowed his music to continue being broadcast and generating royalties in German-controlled territories, which kept him financially afloat.
But the sources show it wasn't an easy choice for him.
No, by 1943, his own diaries show him deeply agonizing over this, really questioning the moral compromise he had made.
He was a man caught in the polarizing crush of history.
Exactly. He was trying to survive, trying to protect his country, all while carrying the paralyzing weight of being a national icon.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to the silence of Gervin-Pay. From the mid-1920s until his death in 1957, which is more than 30 years, he publishes almost no major works.
That's just wild.
After his one-movement Seventh Symphony and the tone poem Tapiola, the music just stops.
He had become intensely critical of his own work, hadn't he?
Immensely.
Yeah.
He once told his close friends, "If I cannot write a better symphony than my seventh, then it shall be my last."
Wow. He felt he had reached the absolute limit of his own symphonic logic.
He really did.
Which leads to the tragic finale of that self-doubt, the story we started with.
A fire.
The fire. Ainu watches him enact what he called his great RussiaThe. He literally borrowed the term for the ritual burning of heretics during the Spanish Inquisition, but applied it to his own Eighth Symphony.
This is so dark.
A work he had spent years on, promised to conductors in London and America, just gone, burned to ash in the dining room.
Unbelievable.
But Aino noted that after he destroyed it, he became calmer and gradually lighter in mood. So what does this all mean for his legacy? Like, looking at it from his perspective, is the burning of the Eighth Symphony a tragedy for the music world? Or was it a necessary act of self-preservation for a man who had already given everything he had to give?
I think it serves as both.
Yeah.
For the world, it is obviously an undeniable loss of art, but for him, it was a release from unbearable expectation.
Right.
I mean, he had battled a crippling tremor, survived throat cancer, navigated the horrors of civil and global wars, and carried the identity of an entire nation on his shoulders.
That is so much for one person.
Destroying the manuscript was his way of taking back control over his own narrative. It was his way of finally saying, "I have finished."
And he lives in quiet retirement for years after that fire.
He does.
And the story of his death is profoundly poetic.
It really is.
In September 1957, he is 91 years old. He is out for his morning walk at Enola. He looks up and sees a flock of cranes approaching. And he turns to Aino and says, "There they come, the birds of my youth." And suddenly, one of the cranes breaks away from the V formation. It circles directly above their home once, rejoins the flock, and flies away.
Wow.
2 days later, Jean Sibelius suffers a brain hemorrhage and dies.
The timing of his death is almost cinematic.
It is.
At the exact moment he passed away, his Fifth Symphony was being broadcast live on the radio in Helsinki, conducted by Malcolm Sargent.
I can't write that.
And halfway across the world, the United Nations General Assembly was actually in session. When the news reached them, the president of the assembly called for a moment of silence.
For a composer.
Yes, delivering a eulogy that stated Sibelius belonged to the whole world and had enriched the entire human race.
From a kid failing at the violin in a debt-ridden home to literally stopping the United Nations in its tracks.
It's an unbelievable trajectory.
And his legacy is still baked into daily life. He was featured on the Finnish 100-mark note until they adopted the euro. His birthday, December 8th, is a national flag-flying day in Finland, known as the Day of Finnish Music.
Right.
And if you compose music on a computer today, there's a very good chance you use the world-famous notation software literally called Sibelius, named in his honor.
This raises an important question about how we consume art, though.
Okay.
How does a man who wrote music so deeply, stubbornly rooted in the landscape and myths of one specific country manage to resonate so powerfully across the entire globe?
That's a great question.
It is because his music, while born of the Finnish forests and the Kalevala, tapped into universal mechanisms.
Huh.
The struggle against oppression, the terror of mortality, the awe-inspiring and violent power of nature. You don't need to be Finnish to feel the icy existential wind in Tapiola or the triumph of the 16 swans in the Fifth Symphony. He translated the raw human experience into physical sound.
He didn't just write notes, he wrote environments. He wrote the weather. He wrote the human soul trying to find its place in the middle of a vast, indifferent forest.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to ponder today. We live in a modern world that is completely obsessed with endless content creation.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. We are conditioned to constantly produce more posts, more art, more opinions, just more noise.
Yeah.
But looking at the life of Jean Sibelius, is there perhaps a profound, unrecognized bravery in knowing exactly when you have said enough? What if Sibelius's 30-year silence and that fire in the dining room wasn't a failure or a tragedy? What if the silence of Gervinpe was actually his ultimate masterpiece? A deliberate, quiet space he carved out, leaving the world with nothing left to do but simply listen.